Entropy. It's the natural order of things falling apart. Systems unraveling, defenses weakening, chaos creeping in. In cybersecurity, we don't fight entropy, we chase after it. I'm Dave Lewis, Global Advisory CISO here at 1Password, and this is the Chasing Entropy podcast, where we peel back the layers of our digital lives to reveal the human decisions, systemic cracks, and overlook patterns that put everything at risk. From boardrooms to breach reports, 0 days to zero trust, we're chasing the questions that keep security leaders awake at night, and the stories that don't necessarily make the headlines. No hype, no FUD, just real talk from the minds shaping the front lines of cybersecurity today. So, I am very happy to say that today we have a special guest on here, and we have Paul Klein. You are the founder of Browserbase. So, who are you, and what is it you say you do here?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to chat more about Browserbase and all the stuff that we're doing with 1Password. But I'm Paul. I'm the founder and CEO of Browserbase. What we do is we build infrastructure to help AI agents navigate the web. So we're a web browser as a service. And if you think of the future of software, software is going to go out and do work on our behalf. But a lot of the work that you and I do, it happens when we use a web browser to access websites. So how are we going to let our AI software interact on our behalf if we're living in the websites where there's no APIs? Well, that's where Browserbase comes in. We're bringing the browser infrastructure to power AI and really helping AI access the legacy web. You know, the DMV isn't going to have an MCP server or an API anytime soon, right? And I think that presents a real big challenge for actually getting AI out there into the world in a secure and trusted way, of course. And at Browserbase, we're about a year and a half old. We're a Series B company, 35 people here in San Francisco. And we're really kind of building on the bleeding edge of how do we build the right tools and infrastructure for AI to go, automate things on our behalf, but also work within the constraints of the web, which wasn't built for bots that need to go out and automate it. So it's an interesting space and a lot of new things happening. AI changes every single week. I swear, every time I take a vacation, a new model comes out. So I'll have to let everyone know next time I take a vacation so they can be ready for the next big evolution to drop in AI.
That's a really funny thing, too, because we're recording this in advance, and I realize that by the time this comes out, there could be like 7 different technologies that have launched in the interim. It really makes it kind of interesting. It's like, how do you keep on top of all of this fast pace in the technology space, especially from agentic web?
Yeah, it's not easy, and I'm lucky to have a team of people here at Browserbase that are constantly always online, always seeing the latest tweet or the latest paper come out. But by being here in San Francisco, you can't avoid it. I walk down the street and I see, billboards everywhere about the latest AI or the latest model that's coming out. But for us, being an infrastructure company, our customers are often the ones that are pushing us forward, who are saying, "Here's the latest thing that we're trying, this experiment we're trying with this model doing this thing on this website," or, "Hey, FYI, Browserbase team, we found that here's how AI can interact with iframes in a programmable way." And these insights are really helpful for us as we build our product out. Being a horizontal infrastructure company, our customers pull us forward along and kind of show us where we need to go. And we really just try and listen to them because they're often the ones that are on the most bleeding edge of building with AI.
Very cool. So, before we get too far into this, for most of our listeners, they may not be necessarily savvy as to what a headless browser is. And the only time I've actually encountered it in the past was with security research done by Matt Johansson and Jeremiah Grossman. So, for the non-technical listener, what exactly does a headless browser do?
Yeah, headless browsers have been around for a long time. This is not a new piece of technology. And browsers themselves have been around even longer, right? A headless browser is it's really the same browser that you and I use every single day. We're actually recording this podcast in a web browser right now, Chrome for me. And a headless browser is just Chrome running without a GUI. It's running without an interface, generally from a command line. But it's a similar, if not, it's the same binary that you use to run, the browser that we all use, just without the rendering engine. So a headless browser is just the browser without the head, without the UI. And this is ideal for running a browser in a server environment when you need a browser to run when your laptop is closed. And headless browsers have often been used for testing workflows, which, in a CI/CD pipeline, you write some code, you need to make sure that some sort of button click is working and tested. Headless browser was probably used for that with Puppeteer, Playwright, Selenium, some of these frameworks to control headless browsers, Cypress. But then also on the automation side of the world, there's headless browsers used because you might need to automate something. Have a customer who might not be able to run a new binary on their machine, Or
Mhm.
maybe, do you really want an AI agent to control a browser that's running locally or within your cloud when browsers are kind of like the Wild West? They can go anywhere, they can download any file. So, how do you run browsers in a secure way, isolated, untrusted, and make sure they can scale in an infrastructure environment without kind of nuking your whole cluster? And that's kind of what Browserbase does a lot of. Headless browsers were not really designed to be run at scale, but we make them run at scale by doing a lot of work on them to ensure their security via Firecracker runtime VMs, through untrusted subnets, through really interesting things around observability and session recording. So you can see what happened in the headless browser, even if there's no UI rendered. We're trying to take the practicality of a web browser, which really can be the integration platform for the entire internet, and package it in infrastructure that developers can use to build these next generation automations that power their applications or their software and allows their software to go somewhere that it might not have been able to go in the past.
Okay. So I'm always curious about the catalytic event that leads somebody to something such as Browserbase, founding it. Like, what were you first trying to solve as a problem that pushed you towards headless browsers as a solution? And you may have touched on this, and I may have just missed that nuance, but I just figured I'd ask that.
No, it's a great question, and I'd say my passion for infrastructure goes all the way back to my first job. I was working at Twilio during their IPO. I was actually on the login and identity access management team. So my responsibility was making sure the login page was secure, and kind of building all the infrastructure to serve authentication at Twilio. That was the authentication microservice that would check the API keys for hundreds of millions of requests per month, right? This kind of strong, scalable authentication infrastructure. And I really became passionate about this infrastructure being a primitive that developers can build on top of. Twilio, of course, being a infrastructure platform for sending and receiving text messages and phone calls via an API. I really like that
Yeah.
business model. It's cool to see you can build a platform that let people build more interesting software on top of, but also usage-based business models are probably one of the most pure incentive-aligned business models. You only
Mhm.
pay for what you use. There's no SaaS wrapper platform fee. You send 100 text messages, you pay for 100 text messages. You use 100 minutes of browsing, you pay for 100 minutes of browsing. And in our business at Browserbase, we only win when our customers win, when they use the product more. So my incentives are to help our customers build these great products and businesses so they use our products more and more. So the inspiration certainly comes from being at an infrastructure company like Twilio, one that was defining a category of infrastructure. But of course, I cut my teeth at my last startup I started building a lot of headless browser infrastructure as a feature to one of our products we were working on. And
Mhm.
I probably spent more time on the infrastructure than I should than I spent on the product I was trying to build myself. And it was such a painful thing because I kept getting to the bottom of Stack Overflow questions. I kept getting to the end of Google searches, trying to figure out how the heck do I get a virtual frame buffer to work with the GPU, and how do I run this in a secure way? How does Firecracker and Kata containers work with Kubernetes? These were not things that were well explored. And in the end, I realized that this experience I had with this headless browser infrastructure product that I've been working on, and my experience at Twilio, where I'd seen what a great infrastructure company can look like, kind of came together to start Browserbase. Especially with the rise of these AI applications and AI agents that needed browsing capabilities to really kind of harness their full capabilities. Browserbase kind of
Mhm.
slotted in based on a little bit of my previous experience, some of the pain I felt as a developer, as well as an opportunity in this market that felt underserved.
So, to your point about your earlier experience at Twilio, is like, how did that work help shape what became Browserbase?
Yeah, in the end, it comes down to how do you build the most expressive primitives for developers to
Mhm.
build on top of. And I've thought a lot about the world of like the future of software. And this guy, Andre Karpathy, has given a great talk about software 3.0, which is agentic software, software that can use tools. And I
Mhm.
found that to be very, very powerful because when you give developers new capabilities, you unlock new markets and can end up powering some of the next billion-dollar companies. And we often say we think the next billion-dollar company is built on Browserbase because there's these new waves of companies who are starting software companies who are building software that might be disrupting the way that existing software works. Your CRM is actually going to go out and fill in information on its own and tell you more about the prospect. Your compliance platform is going to go out and do KYB for you and actually go look at the business and go look at their website. understand what happens. Your accountant might not be going to the Delaware franchise tax website anymore. They may have their agent dispatch and go fill in the details for you. They're just supervising and operating with leverage. So when you give developers more leverage, they can build more powerful software. When you give people better tools, they operate with more leverage. At Browserbase, we're in the business of giving people more leverage by having some automation done on their behalf. And we think
Hmm.
that the products we've built really kind of help people do more with less time. And we think that's really targeted at the developer audience now. But of course, we have an open source framework called Stagehand, which is really a better way to build web automations with natural language, and Director, which is an application designed for anybody to prompt and generate a web automation. So we're not just an infrastructure company. We also have a framework and a UI layer on top of these kind of agentic web automation workflows that we help our customers build.
Okay, so before we get into Director, one of the things I like to do is like look at it from the perspective of what tasks are ideal versus poor fits for browser automation.
Yeah, I'd say that the most ideal tasks are one where they're pretty repetitive. You
Mhm.
want to have them done in a certain way. You want a little bit of determinism, but you also aren't sure like what the entry points might be. So when we see our customers who are a really good fit for browser automation, they probably have 1 to 5 different websites they're trying to automate. For example, one of our customers does procurement. They're a procurement
Mhm.
software company, and sometimes they need to get quotes from many different vendors for different types of SKUs. So they
Yeah.
might want to get one specific type of nail. And they have 5 vendors they normally source this nail from, but they want to use maybe this nail, this nail, this SKU, this type of nut. There's so many different permutations of the workflow they want to do, but it's the same kind of steps. Go to this website, search for this SKU, find the quantity that's available, and then gather some information around how long it's going to take to ship. They aggregate all those insights to a human operator that's going to make the decision on what we should buy, how much from where, right? But the steps are kind of the same. And what we found for our customers is that when you have similar steps of a workflow, maybe what's called like an SOP, similar steps of a
Mhm.
workflow, but maybe different websites or different inputs, which might be a different part or maybe a different shipping address. Those are things that can be really automated by AI quite well. Because what you don't want is to say, hey, AI, go buy me a screw, and you don't give it any specifications, any details. It might find 10 different ways to go buy a certain type of screw. But if you say, hey, I want you to go find out from this website how much screws are available for this part number, here's the shipping address, you're going to get a lot more reliability. And we think
Yeah.
at this stage in the capabilities of AI models, more prompt engineering or more context or more specificity around the task you're trying to accomplish actually gives you a lot more reliability. And that's really where, when we talk to customers, if they're asking us to just, in one line accomplish a perfect workflow, well, that's going to work as well as you telling an intern, hey, go buy some screws at the supermarket, right? You need to give them the shopping list and the steps. And AI is like your intern, right? You still have to do a lot of smart prompting. But with the right prompting and the right infrastructure and frameworks, you can actually automate some workflows as part of your product that a user can click a button and your software can go do some work on their behalf with the right inputs.
I really like that analogy of the AI as your intern. That really hit with me. So why ship Director now? Like, what pain did you see among the semi-technical users out there?
Right. So Browserbase, we're an infrastructure company, right? We run the
Mhm.
browsers, and our customers pay us money to run those browsers. And then we shipped Stagehand, which is our open source browser automation framework, which makes it easier for people to control the browsers. Stagehand is a code interface for the browsers. And then Director, we launched Director because we wanted more people to experience what's possible with
Mhm.
AI controlling a browser, but maybe they don't want to jump into the code right away. There's a lot of
Right.
really educated people out there who love to tinker with AI, but their first instinct isn't to go into the code; it's to go into ChatGPT or Perplexity. And with
Mhm.
Director, we wanted to give people more opportunities to experience. Hey, can AI automate this? Or how do I need to prompt AI to automate things in the right way? In Director, it's not an AI agent at all. It's actually a tool for building AI agents. But with the
Mhm.
simple prompt, you can say, hey, please go find me the top 5 hair salons in San Francisco. Go book a haircut appointment as soon as possible, and ideally, in the afternoon, right? You give it some sort of steps, some tasks, some research it has to do, and Director is actually going to build you software. It's going to write code while executing that task. And you can see that code being written, you can see the task being executed, such that when that workflow is complete, you can actually export that code. You can go put that into your environment, your infrastructure. You can go give it to one of your engineers, say, hey, look what I built. I coded today. There's the rise of these vibe coding platforms, and
Oh,
Director
yes.
seeks to empower all individuals to build software that can automate on their behalf using the primitives that comprise the Browserbase, which is our infrastructure and our framework.
So you gave us a walkthrough there of a director workflow end to end, basically at a high level. So where does the code get generated, and how reusable is it?
So it's generated right there in the interface, and because it's built on our framework stagehand, it's very reusable. The
Mhm.
old world of browser automation was, hey, I want you to go to this website. You're going to click the third button on the page, and it's got to be red, and it can't move at all. But the
Yeah.
new world of browser automation, where AI is included, is you can actually build fuzzy selectors. You could say, click the login button or click the search button. And even if the page changes, because sometimes pages can change, but the button looks exactly the same, but there might be an extra div layered on top or extra class layered on top, or where somehow the color subtly changes, right? What
Yeah.
Stagehand does is it uses a large language model with these natural language inputs and finds the appropriate button or form field or download or anything on the page, such that if the page changes slightly, your workflow will continue to run. This is kind of a paradigm shift from the old world of browser automation. In the past, you needed 100 scripts to automate 100 websites. But now, with large language models, you can use one script to automate any website thanks to Stagehand and this agentic browsing framework we have.
Where was this 30 years ago when I got my start, when I was writing everything with VI?
Exactly. It's a ways away. I mean, I think we've all personally dealt with. If you ever wrote a software test before, hey,
Yeah.
this thing it broke because some developers fixed a change, right? And I think that's really one of the inspirations for Stagehand was the software testing pains that we all experience as developers. But the powerful nature of it is that we want to build SOPs, as kind of prompts and as deterministic steps that we can then apply to many different websites. And if you can represent your prompt as a set of steps, you can input one website or another website into it and go through the same different types of steps. I think that's very powerful. You detach the code and the business logic from the individual website.
So building on that, it's like one of the things that I've been getting heavily into is AI governance and dealing with that, because a lot of times I'm talking to CISOs and they're worried less about the technology, more about the governance aspect of it. So what guardrails exist so that, non-devs are, don't accidentally create brittle or risky automations?
Right. I think a lot of it comes down to your infrastructure platform and observability. So being able to
Mhm.
see what websites your AI agent went to, be able to watch a session replay of what it inputted, what it did on that page. It's a headless browser. Remember that. So you can't actually actively watch it. But with Browserbase, you can actually use what we call the live view to watch what your agent is doing step by step as it's going through. If you need to stop that workflow for whatever reason, if it's going off the rails, you can kind of control that. So to us, security and trust comes from a place of starting with observability. What are the pages it went to? How can I observe what happened? How do I make sure it's not going off the rails? What were the inputs or outputs that we provided to this agent? And with Stagehand, what's quite nice is after the first workflow runs with a Stagehand script, it can actually cache the actions it took so that the next version of the workflow doesn't actually use an LLM at all. It can go off of the
Mhm.
cached outputs of the large language model. So if something works really well for one website, you can pull the LLM out of the loop completely and instead rely on the cached actions instead. So we think about this, really starting at the infrastructure level, but then building it up into the framework. And of course, in Director, you are still prompting with it, controlling it. So it's on you before you productionize any code generated by Director. Probably want to run that through code review with your team, right? Director is really for
Fair
building
point.
that POC and then deploying that, through your CI/CD or anywhere else where you deploy and review code.
Yeah. Okay. So if the industry does move forward with agency licenses as an example, what new security and governance patterns will be needed to make sure that everything is safe and secure?
Yeah, one of the major roadblocks that agents have to hop over before they become production ready is authentication, right?
Mhm.
And really allowing agents to have access to certain types of credentials or resources in certain websites. I'd say authentication is one way you can really protect where an agent can or can't go. You can scope the access that it has and scope and see, is it allowed to access this website or not? Well, does it have credentials or not, right? And being able to agentically provide credentials to an AI
Mhm.
agent is going to be very, very powerful. Maybe you can access a certain type of website or scopes of websites, or maybe even It has a service account that has only read access to a certain website, right? Developers building these agentic software applications can choose to give or remove access to their AI agent that's using a web browser in the same way we give or remove access to one of our employees or one of our peers using a website or software. You just remove the scopes from the roles. You don't have to
Yeah.
reinvent the internet with a new permissions layer for AI. Instead, you can use the same permissions layer that you and I use and provision an account for your agent and say this agent only has read-only access or viewer access to an application and let it go run loose.
So, with managing credentials for agentic AI as an example and looking at things like agentic autofill, I think it'd be really cool if there were some really interesting integrations that you could talk about. You have anything
Yeah,
coming down
and
the pipe?
I think you're alluding to one of the big announcements we have in Director.ai, and probably one of the reasons we're here, right? With Director, you can now use 1Password's agentic autofill to connect your agent to the 1Password credentials vault, and this kind of fills in that gap we talked about because for the rest of the internet, there's not going to be an agentic auth solution. You have to go to where the credentials are, and
Right.
with 1Password agentic autofill and browser-based infrastructure, what you can do is you can tell Director, hey, I want you to go to this e-commerce website and check for my delivery, see if the order has arrived yet. And what it will do is it will check their 1Password vault, assuming you've connected your 1Password vault, and say, oh, I see some websites that match this one and request access. But the most important part of this is that human is in the loop the entire time to approve or deny access your agent is taking. And this pattern of, hey, my agent is requesting access to my vault. Yes, I'll allow it because I know my agent's operating right now. Hey, my agent's looking for access to this grocerystore.com. Yeah, I'll approve access to that too. And then, okay, it's going to go use this password. Yes, approve that. And you can choose to maybe can remember that credential for sometimes. Oh, this is actually a service account I set up for my agent to go do grocery shopping on my behalf. It can always have access to that password. Or maybe this is more time sensitive. It only gets it for 5-10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
What's really nice about the 1Password infrastructure that fits within Browserbase is that the agent never has access to the password. You're not sending your password to a large language model. Instead, it's autofilled into the browser in a secure way so that the password is never transmitted over a network, but instead lives in the 1Password vault that lives alongside the browser, the same way that our 1Password logs into our browsers on our kind of personal devices. So we kind of view that this as being like the most pragmatic way for AI to agentically log in using the same passwords that you and I may have in 1Password, but with the
Mhm.
oversight of a person to approve and understand what it's being used for and if it should or shouldn't use it, as we're still figuring out how AI should be logging in and authenticating on the internet.
Very cool. And really happy to be working with you on that. So, what breaks first when agents become common web users? Who fixes it? Sites or tool makers or what?
Well, it really depends on the use case, I'd say.
Mm.
But the internet wasn't built for bots, right? It was
No.
built for humans to browse the web. And another announcement that we made very recently was our partnership with Cloudflare on
Mhm.
Web Bot Auth, which is a new framework for allowing agents to identify themselves online. So I think there's kind of
Nice.
two parts of the puzzle here. It's like, how do we make sure that agents can securely authenticate and manage users' password in a trusted way? And then how do we
Yeah.
make sure agents can securely browse and authenticate with different web properties and self identify and say, hey, I'm Paul's agent? One of the downsides of IP addresses and user agents is they aren't sufficient to adequately identify agents online, right? And people share IP addresses all the time. But with WebBot Auth, what's very exciting is that agents can actually say, hey, I'm Paul's agent. Here's a cryptographically signed header saying that I belong to Paul Klein. And here's what I'm going to go do on a website. And the way I think about this is that a recipes website is probably okay if Paul's agent is looking up a recipe so I can make my dinner tonight. It's probably not
Sure.
okay if Paul's agent is scraping every recipe on the website to train a large language model, right? But how do you differentiate between the two? You need a way
Yeah.
to have a signed agent or an agent that's authenticated. And Browserbase plus Cloudflare is one way that we're doing, agentic authorization with WebBot Auth.
That's pretty awesome. So, another future looking question here is like, what is your pragmatic future test as to whether or not automation should exist?
Well, it's really in the eyes of the automator. I'm pretty lazy. I'd like to do as little as possible. I like to do the browsing that I'm interested in. Right? I'm going to outsource as much as I can to my AI. Maybe I lean too forward into it, but I'd say that most engineers like me tend to be lazy. I think the best engineers I meet are pretty inherently lazy. They want to automate themselves out of a job. That's why they build so much interesting, scripts or CI/CD, workflows, right? But for our customers, they really focus on the tedious rote work, the tedium that people don't need to. At Browserbase, we've automated the equivalent of like a couple thousand human lives worth of browsing so far. And I
Wow.
kind of like to think about how much of that time can be used for more interesting things, right? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think agentic browsing is going to get rid of browsing the internet the way that you and I do, but it maybe will allow us to focus on the fun browsing. Like for me, that's probably like reading Hacker News or shopping for my my apartment, trying to find the right couch. My wife and I have been searching for days to try and find the right couch. It'll probably eliminate some of the more tedious browsing. Like I really don't want to go to the California Secretary of State website and pull a statement of information, or okay, I
Right.
have to go reconfigure my insurance portal to add my wife. I'd like my agent to do that one and just say, hey, let me know when it's done, right? We want to have people doing more of the interesting, fun, engaging, creative browsing or work, and less of the work that's kind of taking information from one place and putting it into another place. That can be done by your AI agent. I think that's the stuff that's worth automating.
I should be more careful because I took a swig of water just before you said that, and I almost sprayed it all over my desk. Because I have a saying with my kids where I tell them I'm fundamentally lazy. I don't want to remember two stories. So it was really kind of interesting because I always loved to script everything back when I spent 20 years as a defender and securing environments, and anytime I could make stuff easier, I would. So I'm really a big fan of this whole change in technology, or not change so much as evolution of a technology. So as we get down to the last few minutes of this, I would love to switch it up here a bit. And what are some ask you some questions about like one-offs, like for example, what's the most surprising thing that just worked with a director prompt?
So someone just told me, actually from the One Password team, that they had their password renewed by director, which is pretty interesting.
That's
I guess they were
kind of cool.
in some place. I think it was kind of in the Netherlands, and their password was from somewhere in Europe, and they had to go get it renewed. And they just had, hey, go renew my password. Here's the prompt, and they let it run, and they renewed their passport, which is pretty cool, actually. Yeah. So director can be
Wow,
a diplomat as the mule that will help us do some automation.
that's pretty awesome. I like that one. um so if you look back to the early days of 2016 when you were an intern, what's the one thing you believed about the web then you've changed your mind about now?
Well, it's a good question. I think back then it was funny. I was at Twilio on the login team, and one of my jobs was actually defending against fraudulent logins and fraud from attacking Twilio's websites. 2FA toll fraud. It was a big impact even to Twilio back then. And I
Hmm.
really spent a lot of time thinking about like how do I understand these people who are trying to automatically sign up for Twilio accounts. And I think the majority of that was fraud and spam back then. But I think if I was to look back to it now, and I talked to some of our customers, the worldview on bots has shifted quite a bit. I talked to a major top 10 national retailer recently, and what they were telling me was like, we are terrified that we're going to miss out on all of the AI agents that are going to be shopping and buying on behalf of our customers because we've set things up to always block the bots. And
Right.
it's kind of interesting that there's now good bots and bad bots. And at Browserbase, we really want to be an arbiter of good bots online and represent our customers well, and tell the customer stories like this is a real automation. This is, a company like Perplexity or Clay that we're working on behalf of to help
Mhm.
their AI automate the web on behalf of real people. And the systems now are set up really to block all bots, but we really want to figure out a way to identify good bots online because there are going to be more and more of them. And
Right.
if the internet doesn't kind of wake up and say, okay, the cat's out of the bag, there are going to be these agents browsing. How do we build systems to enable the good ones to browse while preventing the bad, fraudulent ones? That's a conversation we want to be really involved in and help advocate for our customers, but also help partner companies understand the perspective of agents a lot more. It's an ever changing conversation, just like it's always been. But now with AI kind of here to stay, we want to make sure that we build the right guardrails for AI to browse reliably and responsibly.
Makes sense. So and the rate of change is one thing that it really gets me too, is that every day there's something new to learn. And I find that really a daunting but a wonderful prospect because I feel like I'm 20 years younger now because I'm learning all these new things that I used to know all sorts of, this category over here, and now it's all brand new. And it's absolutely exciting in that perspective, but it is a little bit challenging trying to find information to learn, knowing the right places to go. So, do you have any books or, heaven forbid, blogs or anything like that, or a talk somebody gave that you would recommend for someone that's interested in learning about automation?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. I first, of course, our Browserbase blog is full of good stuff that I've written about, browsing and agentic automation. I'd also really defer to my good friend Sean Wang. His Twitter handle is SWYX, Swix,
So,
and he actually puts on the AI Engineering World Fair, which is this yearly conference in San Francisco for AI engineers. I spoke last year, and I've always been really satisfied with the content there. It's a wide swath, everything from AI for the CIO all the way down to context engineering and vector databases for engineers, right? They try and cover all of their bases. So I definitely
yeah.
recommend looking through the last year's talks. Maybe you'll see mine on MCPs. Maybe you'll see my friend Dexter's talk on context engineering. There's really a whole lot of interesting content that covers the vast width of different topics within engineering with AI in mind. And I think it should be top of mind for every executive. How can we use AI to make our product better, make our team more productive, change the world? These are all things you can use with the latest technology. And it is here, it is happening, it is getting better. And we see it in production every day with our customers. I'm always here to help people if they want to talk more about how to apply this stuff. You can just contact me via Browserbase.
So, based on that, and just because this podcast usually focuses on the CISOs, what one piece of advice would you give to a CISO that is looking into this sort of realm of technology?
I have so many pieces of advice for the CISOs because I've been talking to them all day long when I go through procurement. I'd say there's a few different areas that I kind of flag when you think about security with AI. And remember, once again, I come from the identity and access management side and used to do a
Yep.
lot of red teaming and capture the flags way back in the day. So there's like a couple primitives that are just super important to think about. One is AI agents that call tools. That's remote code execution, right?
Mhm.
You're letting AI do some remote code execution. So thinking about the environment that remote code execution is happening is extremely important. Any sort of RCE that can be that is non-deterministically called can be very dangerous if it's running in your cloud. So you need the right guardrails around it, the right virtualization layers, making sure that you don't have anything dangerous in the prompts or information that could be leaked through the prompts is protected, right? So making sure that stays safe. Secondly, is this idea that you probably can't let your agent call any tool. You need to constrain the amount of tools that it can call and make sure that if it's calling a certain number of tools that you've pre-screened or pre-authorized for. In the age of MCP, you probably don't want to layer agent to access every MCP server, but only the ones that you're screening and understand, because you're going to be on the hook if you give your agent access to this infinite toolbox, right? So those are the two I really think about. It's like this is remote code execution if you're letting an agent run code. And secondly, okay, if you do that in a secure way, make sure the tools it's using are trusted. Those are the two principles I really advise CISOs that we talk to about AI agents and security, because in the end, there's dependency management, supply chain, and the code execution environment that are really be important for ensuring your information, your data doesn't go to the wrong parties if an AI agent goes off the rails.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this today. I really do appreciate it. When I was going through your LinkedIn profile, I saw one of your top skills was Java, and I used to write Java back when the world was flat. And I still wake up screaming. So my hat's off to you on that one.
Yeah, I miss my days of Java. It's now all JavaScript or Go, so
Yeah.
things have changed quite a bit.
Oh, true, true. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Paul Klein, we've been talking with Paul Klein here on the Chasing Entropy podcast. I'm Dave Lewis. Be sure to like and subscribe and all that sort of fun stuff. And I'm really looking forward to this agentic autofill announcement being in the public domain. So thank you very much for doing this today. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Cheers.